Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. US President Donald Trump leaves for Alaska on Air Force One, bracing for his high-stakes talks with Vladimir Putin. Trump issues strong statements before his departure, warning the Russian president that he will not be messed around. On his way to said Alaskan summit, Donald Trump says territorial swaps with Russia will be discussed, but the final decision is for Ukraine, adding he may consider security guarantees outside NATO. He insists no business with Moscow will happen until the war ends. Israeli drones have ordered thousands to leave northeastern and parts of northwestern Zetoin in Gaza City, following a week of airstrikes, artillery barrages, and 350 home demolitions. The area has been a key target in Israel's ongoing offensive against Hamas. Torrential monsoon rains trigger landslides and flash floods across northern Pakistan, killing at least 160 people in 24 hours. Authorities warn of more heavy rain as climate-driven extreme weather batters the region. The United Nations says Israel's plan to build thousands of homes between a West Bank settlement and East Jerusalem is illegal and could force Palestinians from their land, a war crime under international law. Germany has urged Israel to halt the project. Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem warns Lebanon's government is handing the country to Israel by pushing to disarm the group, vowing to keep weapons as long as aggression and occupation continue. The plan, backed by the US, faces strong opposition from Iran. Spain is fighting 14 major wildfires that have killed 7 people and burned an area the size of London. A 12-day heatwave and strong winds are making this one of the worst fire seasons in 2 decades. Advocacy groups have filed a criminal case against Germany's foreign and interior ministers, accusing them of failing to protect approved Afghan refugees in Pakistan from being sent back to Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. Pakistan has started deportations ahead of a September the 1st deadline, affecting over 1 million people. Now, our top story today. US President Donald Trump says his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska could have severe consequences if no progress is made. He will set tariffs on steel and chips next week, but rates will start lower. Trump says Putin is interested in the US economy and that any business will have to wait until the war stops. He believes ongoing attacks in Ukraine hurt Putin's position, despite Moscow thinking otherwise. Trump says something will come from the talks and security guarantees are possible with Europe. Let's have a look at what Trump said.
He's a smart guy, been doing it for a long time, but so have I. Been doing it for a long time. And here we are, we're president. That was much more difficult than what I'm doing today, believe me. So we get along. There's a good respect level on both sides. And I think, something's going to come of it. I noticed he's bringing a lot of business people from Russia. And that's good. I like that because they want to do business, but they're not doing business until we get the war settled. I think they're trying to negotiate. He's trying to set a stage. I mean, in his mind, that helps him make a better deal. It actually hurts him. But in his mind, that helps him make a better deal if they can continue the killing. Maybe it's a part of the world. Maybe it's just his fabric, his genes, his genetics. But he thinks that makes him, gives him strength in negotiating. I think it hurts him, but I'll be talking to him about it. They'll be discussed, but I've got to let Ukraine make that decision. And I think they'll make a proper decision. But I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. I'm here to get them at a table. And I think you have two sides. Look, Vladimir Putin wanted to take all of Ukraine. If I wasn't president, he would right now be taking all of Ukraine. But he's not going to.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country is counting on US support. He calls the summit a vital step towards just peace and urges a substantive three-way discussion with the United States and Russia. Zelensky says it is time to end the war, warning any settlement that leaves Ukrainian territory under Russian control is not to happen. Talks are set to be the most significant since the war began. We're now joined by our guest, Dmitry Symes Jr. He's the head of Sputnik, and he joins us live from Moscow. Thank you very much for joining us, Dmitry. I first of all wanted to get your reaction to Donald Trump stating that he won't do business with Russia, with Moscow, until this war is over. Now, Russia has been isolated economically from the West since this war began. What is the current economic situation in Russia, and how badly, or if at all, do they need to stop this isolation?
Well, one small correction. I'm not head of Sputnik. I'm head of Sputnik India and Sputnik International. But to answer your question, regarding the economic situation, back in 2022, Biden promised to break the Russian economy with sanctions. We had numerous Western leaders, politicians, economists predict the total collapse of the Russian economy. That didn't happen. In fact, the opposite happened. Russia outgrew the entire G7, in 2023, in 2024. So 2 years in a row, Russia outgrew the entire G7. Russia also saw wages increase. Russia saw, the resurrection of its industrial base. So if we are to look at the big picture, the Russian economy is stronger and more self-reliant now in 2025 than it was before the conflict started. Now, that isn't to say that there haven't been difficulties along the way. Obviously, interest rates in Russia are quite high. And, that creates some difficulties for businesses who want to take out credit. That may create some challenges for young people who want to buy their first apartment or their first home. But overall, I would say that the consequences of Western sanctions have been very manageable, in large part because the West is no longer the economic heavyweight that it was in the 1990s and the 2000s, or even the 2010s. Russia quite successfully reoriented its trade, gained investment from Asian heavyweights like China, like India, major countries in West Asia like the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. And of course, it became more self-reliant. A lot of products, a lot of brands that came from the West have been replaced by Russian alternatives.
Dmitry, sorry, apologies to interrupt there. Of course, the official figures do say something different, that in Q2 of 2025, growth has tumbled 1.1%, down from 4.0% the previous year. People are saying that these sanctions are Donald Trump's leverage for peace, along with the tariffs. One example, he put an extra 25% tariff on India for buying Russian oil, one of Russia's main exports. Are these economic sanctions not leverage for Donald Trump going into these talks?
So, regarding the official figures, right? If you compare 4% growth to 1.5% growth, that's still
1.1,
growth, right? Yeah, 1.1, apologies. That's still growth. And if you compare it, for example, to Germany's economic growth, the United Kingdom's economic growth, the Russian economy, which is the most sanctioned economy in the world, is performing better than the supposedly members of the developed world. But I would also say that if to those who believe that the Russian economy is somehow suffocating, I would merely say go travel around Russia. You can go to shopping malls, you can go to business conferences, and you can see that the economic activity is very vibrant. Obviously, every single quarter there comes certain challenges, certain adjustments. you can get, an uptick in forecast, a downgrade in forecast. But overall, I think the Russian economy has clearly proven that it's quite resilient. Regarding the threat of the new sanctions, right? The U.S. assumption was that it could pressure
Dimitri,
India.
Dimitri, I'm very, very sorry to interrupt you once again. We are on a time constraint here. I wanted to move now on to territorial concessions, possible territorial concessions. Obviously, there was a huge worry from the Ukrainian camp that Donald Trump would agree to Ukraine giving up its territory without it being present at these talks in Alaska. However, Donald Trump has now come out with some statements and said that Ukraine does need to be there. What are your expectations from these talks, if there are going to be any, when it comes to territory? And do you think it's essential that Ukraine is at these talks in order to discuss this?
I mean, I think Russia's conditions for ending this conflict have been very clear since June 2024, when Putin laid out, the basics, which meant, first of all, a halt to NATO expansion, a point that Trump conceded on earlier today. And secondly of all, recognition of political, military, and legal reality, which is that when we talk about Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson, and of course Crimea, which reunified with Russia in 2014, these are all territories which voted to rejoin Russia. These are territories who have been liberated with Russian soldiers giving their life and health to free. And accordingly, these are now parts of Russia. They have historically been parts of Russia, and now they have returned home. And so there can be no compromise on this. The Russian Constitution makes it very clear that no Russian government has the right to give up territory that is, legally part of Russia. And as for Ukraine, again, President Putin said that he doesn't exclude the possibility of a future meeting with Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials. But again, I think everyone in Russia understands that the center of decision-making in Ukraine is not in Kiev, it's in Washington, D.C. And the reason we're meeting with Trump is because Trump is the ultimate decision maker when it comes to what Ukraine does. Because without U.S. military support, without U.S. financial support, there's nothing the Ukrainians can do.
Okay, Dimitri Symes, thank you very much. Pleasure talking to you on the program, head of Sputnik India. Thank you very much for joining us. We now move over to the Indo-Pacific waters, where China has demanded that the United States effectively restrain its forces and cease all provocative actions in the South China Sea. The statement comes following the expulsion of the U.S. destroyer Higgins by Chinese military for allegedly entering territorial waters near Huangyang Gao without permission. Let's listen in to what the Ministry of National Defense spokesperson had to say for China.
黄岩岛是中国固有领土，美西京4号驱逐舰未经中国政府批准，非法侵闯中国黄岩岛领海，严重侵犯中国领土主权和国家安全，严重破坏南海和平稳定，肆意践踏国际法和国际关系基本准则。中方对此表示强烈不满和坚决反对，已向美方提出严正交涉。我们要求美方切实约束一线部队，立即停止对中方的有关侵权挑衅行动。中国军队时刻保持高度戒备，坚决捍卫国家主权和安全，坚定。
We're now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao, who's a fellow at the Hudson Institute. He's joining us live from Tokyo in Japan. Dr. Nagao, this incident with the USS Higgins happened just a few days ago, where a United States vessel was expelled from the South China Sea near the Scarborough Shoal. Could you tell me why that is such a contentious area, why China claims it, and what do you think the US response will be, if any?
this Scarborough Shoal is a very important place indeed. China is building the artificial island in the Paracel Island, Spratly Island, in the South China Sea, but connected with the Hainan Island, Paracel Islands, and Spratly Island. This is just one line. So this means that one line means that as a front line, this is not effective because to maintain front line, they need a strategic depth. So, but if China builds artificial island in the Scarborough Shoal, Spratly Island, Paracel Island creates the triangle, and Hainan Island is supporting base for this triangle. This could happen. In this case, these three edges consist to cover the full of the South China Sea as the area, not the line. And in this case, the area surrounded by these three islands, there is a sacred area protected by fighter jet, patrol plane, or naval ship deployed from these artificial islands. So China can deploy the nuclear missile mounted on the nuclear submarine in the island triangle, and no one wants to take the risk of the nuclear war. That's why after China deploys and hides the submarine within this triangle, this area will be China's area. No one touch it. So that's why if China builds artificial island in Scarborough Shoal, no one will touch the China's area in the South China Sea militarily. So preventing China's building the artificial island in Scarborough Shoal is very important. So why the U.S. ship and the Chinese ship confronting in the Scarborough Shoal, or Philippine ship is trying to intervene in the Scarborough Shoal? Because there is a possibility that China is showing the sign to build the artificial island in Scarborough Shoal. This is a decisive place. So this is a competition in the Scarborough Shoal. China tried to build, and the U.S. and Philippines tried to stop it. So the U.S. Navy enter this, Philippine Navy enter this, and to prevent China's build. And China say, this is irresponsible. But real irresponsible behavior came from China's side. China tried to build the artificial island to occupy all of the South China Sea by deploying the nuclear ballistic missile submarine. It will happen if China succeed to build the artificial island in Scarborough Shoal. So that's why now is a decisive battle. This is a competition. Of course, this is peacetime, but this is a competition. Very important competition is ongoing in the Scarborough Shoal. That is what happened, I believe.
Yes, Dr. Nagal, thank you very much for joining us here and giving us that great insight on that developing story. We will, of course, bring you all updates from the Indo-Pacific and around China as we get them. We now move on and over to West Asia, where Israeli settlers attacked the Palestinian village of Atara in the West Bank on Friday. Residents report 3 cars were set on fire and graffiti was left on walls. The Israeli military said it is investigating the incident. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry has also condemned the attacks, blaming what it called incitement by the Israeli government. Rights groups say settler violence has risen since Israel's war with Hamas in Gaza began in late 2023. Dozens of Israelis have also been killed in Palestinian attacks, while the military has intensified raids in the West Bank. Around 700,000 Israeli settlers live among the 2.7 million Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem, areas claimed by Palestinians for a future state. Listen in to what one of the residents said.
قاعدين هنا على باب الدور قاعدين احنا والشباب ولاد اخوي واصحاب فيش بين ما دخلنا وروحوا ربع ساعة بس طلعت انا فوق قعدت شوي ولاد اخوي في الدار فوق عن ظهر من الطبق الثاني فيش 10 دقايق ما شفتك الا الصوت كام هيك زي شي فكع. ضربوها داروا هيك طلع زي رغم. نزلنا على الصوت ما لحقت انزل للسيارات مولعات. شفت لك هالشوف انا قلت يعني ضربان عقلي شو يولعهن. شوي لابن اخوي بقول لي لو بكي انت بس عم مستوطنين هان لحقوهم لتحت تحت تحت لو باكين الساعه مولعين السياره اللي تحتها هم جايين من تحت مولعوا السيارتين اللي تحتها وجوا ولعوا.
We're now joined by Ross Feingold. He is a political analyst and he joins us live from Taipei in Taiwan. Ross, thank you very much for joining us. As we've just read, settler attacks in the West Bank are on the rise. Before we get into some claims by certain organizations and peoples, what exactly do these Israeli settlers want and how would you describe their actions?
They want to change the facts on the ground, no matter the legalities or illegalities of their actions. And they know that no matter what they do, the chances of being prosecuted by the Israeli government is pretty remote. So they continue to carry out these attacks. They want to force Palestinians to move from land, which in many cases Palestinian families or villages have lived on for an extended period of time, literally hundreds of years. But the goal of the settlers is, again, it's to change the facts on the ground. And they know that the risk of any kind of punishment is remote. And this helps expand Israeli settlements in the West Bank. And frankly, it really makes achieving a two-state solution extremely difficult.
Ross, where does international law come into this? Obviously, the settlements themselves are seen as breaking that. However, what consequences does Israel face for violating international law in this regard? We've obviously seen violent attacks from settlers as well. And this also comes with a new announcement that there will be thousands of new settlements, places for Israeli settlers to live between East Jerusalem and another Palestinian village. And Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has boasted that this buries the idea of a Palestinian state. What are your thoughts on that?
One important factor to keep in mind here is that Israel's most important security partner and most important friend in the international community, the United States, is simply not going to criticize Israel over settlement expansion in the West Bank. Previous administrations have been reluctant to do this. Depending on who the president is, the criticism might have been stronger compared to other presidents. But the Trump administration is not going to criticize Israel over settlement expansion. So really the main variable here is what is going to be the reaction from European governments. The European Union is Israel's most important trading partner. And up to now, we know that civil society in Europe is critical of Israel on this issue. Some members of parliament across Europe are critical as well. But ultimately, European governments up to now have been very reluctant to take any kind of substantive action to punish Israel over this issue. Now, that might be changing because of frustration over the number of civilian deaths in Gaza, over the humanitarian situation and the growing number of people who lack access to food in Gaza, as well as frustration with what's going on in the West Bank. So really the thing to watch in the coming weeks and months is what will the European governments do, especially since more and more of them are recognizing Palestine as an independent country.
Indeed, Ross. Thank you very much for joining us. We do stay with us as we move over to Europe for a flash from our leading story today. A Russian missile strike has sparked a fire and injured at least one person in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region, according to the regional governor. This comes as Trump and Putin are set to meet in Alaska. Ross, obviously the leading story in the geopolitical world here. What does it show on Putin's stance on this war, that he is still escalating hostilities, even as Donald Trump's plane is in the air to meet the Russian president?
President Trump has already started to criticize President Putin in recent weeks over continued Russian attacks on civilian residential facilities, energy facilities, et cetera, but that hasn't changed President Putin's planning or the actions of the Russian military. At the same time, Ukraine has also in recent days and weeks conducted attacks within Russia against energy-related infrastructure as well. All of that is probably very frustrating to President Trump because he wants to negotiate a ceasefire. But from the perspective of both Russia and Ukraine, they want to ensure that they are in the best position on the ground at the time of any ceasefire. So of course they want to have negotiating leverage, and they want to have as much territory in their hands as possible, and they also want the other side to know that they retain a significant military capability. So all of that factors into the decision making of both Russia and Ukraine as we count down the moments to this meeting and await whether or not there will be a ceasefire proposal that President Trump would in turn take to the Ukrainian side.
Okay, Ross, thank you very much. You are staying with us to discuss further updates, but we do have further breaking news on this topic. The Kremlin says President Vladimir Putin's plane is expected to arrive in Alaska at 11 a.m. local time, where he will be greeted by US President Donald Trump ahead of their highly anticipated meeting. We're now joined by Joshua Barnes, who's an anchor and correspondent for NewsX World. He joins us live from the NewsX World newsroom. Josh, what can you tell us about what is anticipated for these talks? How is the day going to look?
Well, yes, absolutely. Good evening, Thomas, from, of course, New Delhi. It is earlier in the morning over in Alaska where this summit is set to take place. We have had confirmation, of course, that Vladimir Putin is set to arrive by plane in Alaska at around the 11 a.m. local time. The meeting, the summit, is planned to start just half an hour later. So this will be a swift process. Donald Trump expected to meet Vladimir Putin on the runway and greet him as the Russian president leaves his plane. We expect there to be a more sort of, not necessarily informal, but a wider meeting over some food, where the delegates from the US and Russia, of course, will be speaking and talking about diplomatic efforts, of course, to end this war in Ukraine, but other topics, including trade, partnerships, and a potential nuclear deal, also set to be discussed. Then following that, we've had confirmation from the White House yesterday that there will be a one-on-one meeting between Vladimir Putin and President Donald Trump. This will take place sometime after this 11:30 a.m. local time kickoff because of what I've just explained. So we expect there to be some time, and then following this summit, there then will potentially be a joint press conference. There have been reports that this will be taking place. There's also been some indication that with Donald Trump not guaranteeing it, but we do expect there to be a joint conference where the meetings will be discussed, and not all information will be given, of course, but if there are any key developments, we expect the media to be addressed. Now, just to provide some context, of course, Donald Trump has said multiple times that he will know within minutes whether Vladimir Putin is keen on ending this conflict in Ukraine. Rhetoric he has continued, and he is having a hardline stance on this, of course, looking to end this war, something he said he would do right at the start, first day in office, back in January when he had started his second term as US president. So it will be interesting to see how long this one-on-one meeting takes. If Putin doesn't give the right signals, is Trump going to end the meeting? We don't know. We will wait and see. And of course, all information will become clearer as we get closer to that 11:30 start time. But lots to look forward to. And of course, all of those updates coming here on NewsX World.
Well, thank you very much for providing that context. We now move on once again, where Turkish police have arrested 44 people in Istanbul, including the mayor of the Beyoğlu district and several advisors. The arrests over alleged corruption are the latest in a months-long crackdown on the main opposition Republican People's Party, otherwise known as the CHP. Earlier, Istanbul's mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu was detained in March and remains imprisoned. To this, the CHP leader Özgür Özel says no indictment has been produced in 149 days, calling the arrests political vengeance. Since October, 9 of Istanbul's 26 CHP district mayors have been jailed, most denying corruption charges. Analysts say the government is seeking to weaken the CHP after it scored major local election wins last year. We're now joined by Ross Feingold once again to give us some analysis and context. Ross, what can you tell us about the current political state of Turkey? We have seen these huge demonstrations mainly across Istanbul for that day in March when Ekrem İmamoğlu, the mayor of the city, was in fact imprisoned. What can you tell us about the political situation that is going on there right now?
Well, most of this is about maneuvering for the next presidential election. It's scheduled for 2028, but they could have a snap election earlier if Turkey's parliament votes for that. And although President Erdogan is term limited, if there is a snap election, he would actually be eligible to run for another term. So most of this, again, is really about maneuvering for the next presidential election and ensuring that Erdogan can extend his time in office. An important thing to keep in mind here is the reaction from the United States. And President Trump has made it very clear, and we saw that, frankly, in recent days with the release of the U.S. State Department's Global Human Rights Report, that under President Trump's foreign policy, the United States is not going to make the same comments and criticisms about domestic politics in countries around the world that it previously did under earlier presidents. So if you're President Erdogan and his government, you're kind of saying, why not? We'll do what's necessary to ensure that President Erdogan can serve another term.
Yes, Ross Feingold, thank you. Always a pleasure to talk to you and some very valuable insight there, as always. We return to the South Asian region next, where flash floods caused by heavy rains have killed at least 49 people in northwestern Pakistan and other parts of the country over the past 24 hours, officials have said, as rescuers evacuated 1,300 stranded tourists from a mountainous district affected by landslides. More than 360 people, mostly women and children, have also been killed in rain-related incidents across Pakistan since June the 26th, with most recent fatalities reported in the country's northern and northwestern regions. At least 10 people were also killed on Thursday after flash floods swept through Gaza district in Gilgit-Baltistan region, according to the regional government spokesperson Fazullah Faraq. Another 16 people, including women and children, also died on Thursday in Bajaur district of northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province when a massive cloudburst triggered flash flooding, according to the official Amjad Khan. He said 17 others were swept away and still remain missing. Flash floods also struck Battagram district in the northwest, killing 10 people, according to the government administration. They said another 18 people still remain missing. We will, of course, bring you all the updates that we can in regard to that developing situation in Pakistan. Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.